American branch eventually became called the Council on Foreign Relations. It sounds better than Royal. It wouldn't go down too well within the United States. But they had all these big players working with them, and they had different branches, special branches, and other foundations working on special areas, like the Fabian Society, to bring in what they saw was the socialist type society with an elite group ruling them, a scientific elite. That's all through all of the writings. Specialists would have the right to rule the people underneath them, the masses, as they commonly referred to them, the unwashed masses. But there would be a structured society, and at the top of their list was depopulation of the masses for a post-industrial society. They wanted extensive birth control. They wanted to legitimize abortion, mandatory abortion, very early on in Britain. Again, by this new kind of government they would bring in. But they knew it would take many, many years of incrementalism to get the public ready to accept all of this. Well, it's all here now. We accept it because we've been debauched generation by generation. You see, as Quigley said, the average person has a hard time when they come up with an idea and start a process. We want to see things accomplished in our one lifetime. Whereas a foundation can last for 100, 200 years with one mandate. And then you get 50 of these foundations, or 100 of them working with their separate parts of the same mandate for 100, 200 years. Hiring people full-time, retiring people, recruiting, retraining, and they get things done. That's how it really does work. There's nothing happening today that was not written about by the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute for International Affairs right back about 1920 or so. There's nothing that's happening today. They talked about a unified monetary system that they would eventually bring in. Once they had the world under 3 trading blocks. Each trading block would have a kind of one parliament, a provincial type parliament, not an ultimate one, because they'd all be subservient to a world government. That's what the United Nations is today. It's the whole structure for world government. You don't realize that nearly everything that happens through your education system, through the different branches of UNESCO at the United Nations, runs your whole school systems. It doesn't matter what country you're in. Every country is signed on to it. And once you've signed on, you must obey it. That's how it's set up. They also talked about going into, again, the destruction of the family unit, something utterly necessary to bring in a planned society. George Orwell talked about it too. He was at world meetings. He was groomed actually to take part as an elite member of the crew from a private school. He was recruited at university in Cambridge, as many were in fact, and he turned against them eventually and let the cat out the bag. You find that he corresponded constantly with Aldous Huxley in the 1930s. Talking about what kind of system the elite were going to bring in. And now they knew all this stuff. They knew all the big players involved. They knew all the richest people on the planet who ran the foundations, that really ran the governments of the world, and the banks. And they talked about, would it really be totalitarian, as George Orwell predicted, or would it be a gradual implementation through basically conditioning children generation by generation to have sex at a very, very early age. Now, that was Huxley's idea. He didn't make it up himself. He got the idea from Lord Bertrand Russell, who also worked in these big think tanks, global think tanks. And Lord Bertrand Russell had experimental schools where he was allowed to do things that were not allowed to do anywhere else. He would have been hung outside of these protected schools that were given royal charters to experiment on children, and where they encouraged pre-pubertal sex. The idea being, if you could really overdose children with sexual images and thinking, if you get them really interested in getting them into pre-pubertal sex, then they would be going from partner to partner very, very quickly, and they would never bond with anyone. The idea being they want to bring in a brave new world. the Huxley type scenario, where no one would have to bond with anyone, sex was easily available, any kind of sex would do, and that was taken up also by Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, who was the first CEO of UNESCO, that brings in this agenda in the curriculums for education across the world, especially sexual education. Scientifically designed, in other words, scientifically designed systems, and they knew too that it would take from maybe the 1920s. They tried the Roaring Twenties. We tend to always forget the Roaring Twenties. The miniskirt came in then, the Charlton, the dance, the booze cans were made very, very popular because they were naughty, and the youngsters went in there, and sex was really promoted through the jazz and all the rest of it. These are the techniques they use, because Plato says you always use the culture industry. That's music, drama, all the rest of it, fashion too. Always. Same techniques. But the fallout back then was overwhelming. Venereal disease was rampant because there were no antibiotics. The children out of wedlock were getting thrown into boys' homes and girls' homes. Or the backstreet abortionists were just having a flourishing trade. And so it fell into disrepute. It didn't work. So they went back to the drawing board, and they used the people's tax money, masses of tax money, to go into scientific research to find ways to stop people conceiving children, to stop women conceiving. And that's why they came up with the pill. It was a must-be. And millions and millions of dollars were spent on this. Regardless of what else was needed in society, that was a must-be. And then when they got the pill, they reintroduced the music again, the miniskirt, the aren't we naughty scenarios, and started off the hippie generation, as they called it. And at the same time, they were pushing the social changes. Socialism really is what they were talking about. Getting government that cared. Now, government that cares has so many different branches that end up dominating your life. That's the real intention. That's how you bring in socialism. It starts off by something that seems kind of reasonable. Well, if we're paying all these taxes, we should be getting the services back, shouldn't we? And that makes sense. But of course, what it ends up being is you have all these agencies, government agencies, that end up dominating and domineering and guiding your lives.